Three times the charm. Howdy, seekers. This is Black Pope Vice. This is part 2 of a 6-part lecture on who we are, what we are. I am talking about the microcosm from the most physics element to it. I don't want to have a social element to this. And if I do, it's going to be as little as I can, because parts 3 and 4 are going to be about the macrocosm and the microcosm on the social level, and 5 and 6, if it comes really to, I know my account has some activism posts on it, but never really get into, like, yeah, I want the $1,000 a month, but other than that, my political activism is, warlordism, essentially. And I'll talk about that in the sense 5 and 6, but if that's a political thing. But part 2 is about, more or less, the standard model. If you know anything about physics, the standard model is, or don't know anything about physics, the standard model has to do with, like, it's a chart, basically, and it has, like, atomic theory on it. It talks about the mathematics behind strong and weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, gravity, talk about some particle parts, etc. It's the most elemental part of physics knowledge we have. It's called the standard model. We're going to talk about that, but on the microcosm level of the human, and I'm going to exclude any sort of activism and social elements. So, previous videos, I talked about humans as quantum witness engines, and that has to do with the idea that without a certain level of consciousness, there is no tangible reality. And this is based off, the logical conclusions of quantum theory about if, when we look at the dual slit experiment with light as a particle in a beam based on observation or not, we can kind of conclude what's going on the larger scale, as above so below, about reality. We're humans first beings. Let me get back for all that. So, yeah, and this idea of witness, really kind of leads to this idea of, well, there's supposed to be a witnessing element to experiencing reality. When we think about reality, we have to fundamentally think about it from this perspective. So, then you have to go back to individuals like Joseph Campbell. These are the kinds of this is the kind of texts, if you want to explore more on this subject, read about. But when we think about this idea of observation, and we, humans, regardless of, our caste level or whatever, have very similar parts. I mean, some people definitely have better equipment in here, but that's something that is, you're gifted genetically through lineage. Other things like chakras, you're gonna have, probably some base starting stats from, ancestral lineage and karma and things like that. But those are things you cultivate. Does everyone have access to all their chakras? I don't know. For certain, I'm going to say it would be kind of weird. Well, it is kind of weird because I have ideas about how much the average human, the average NPC really has in terms of functional, normal states of these, dimensional portals, energy wells within us. Are the other yogis and such covering up? Maybe. Maybe I'm the one who's wrong. Quite conceivable. Sometimes, as much as I am, doing pretty extreme stuff, And I do seem to have a lot of very specific and oddly relevant answers and theories to explain some important things. It's a big mystery. And that's what I want to impart upon you. What are you going to do? I have some poetry. Some of my poems are really dedicated to this subject because it's really, it's an easier way to, express some ideas in really quick concepts without, but with a lecture, I can go off on tangents and talk about various things. But I have some poetry on my Instagram, same handle, that talks about this stuff. I think I posted some stuff on Twitter, but more specifically, back to what everyone wants, the lecture. So, this mystery you're a part of, what are you going to do? I mean, it's really, I guess this is kind of political because it's ultimately, this lecture is talking about existentialism. What are you going to do? It's easier to figure out what you're going to do if you kind of understand where you are. In the last lecture, we talked about how this is a simulation, and the simulation is just based on the fact that, besides God being a gamer, obvious, the tools used to creation, what we have is video games, and we create various smaller scale models of various worlds inside video games. And when we look at our reality, what is matter? It's, the atom. It's mostly empty space that has an element of solidness because of, well, we have a standard model that explains this, but, strong and weak nuclear force basically creates a barrier between atoms, so we just don't blend with one another. So the mystery. And this is kind of understood because when we talk about magic, the mysteries is a way of saying the philosophies, the religions. The mysteries are the official title for this. So we could say the Christian mystery, the Islamic mystery, we can say the Wiccan mystery, whatever I do mystery. I have to come up with an official name for it. But on kind of that note, it is in ways, I'm talking about, you have to figure out what it is for yourself. What do you want to do? And I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about myself because, it's a technique in storytelling to talk about yourself when trying to convey an idea about in this related subject. I don't know how to. Anyway, so, I have these. When I was 20 or so, I first, some people are like, oh yeah, YouTube doesn't radicalize people. And it's like, oh, it does. But it's like, it's so easy to get radicalized when you live in a Kali Yuga society where it's all kind of fake and gay. And ultimately, the society we live in, a capitalist totalitarianism, it's inauthentic. And in many ways, as horrible as communism and Nazism and fascism have an elements, I mean, they have some nice elements to them, but they're also pretty shitty. They are better because at least they were honest in ways that our system is not. Because ultimately our system is just as violent. It just perpetrates its violence in slow kill and structural violence. So, when you kind of, as a young man kind of figure this, you get names like structural violence and you begin to realize what that is and how real it is. I mean, because you don't have to, the one thing that's good about liberal theories is they've come up with names for certain terminology. That's really good. That the right wing kind of just really ignored, because it's like, oh yeah, structural violence, that's kind of just a necessary thing for civilization, rather than ever naming it and be like, okay, how do we minimize structural violence? Because when we look at the system itself, the simulation, it is a system of structural violence. It has its own structural violence, though the human is, in theory, capable of superseding it. If we believe in the tale of Apollonius of Tyria, as to be authentic, he was a fruitarian. That's all he did. He just ate fruit from trees. And I've been under the impression that if there is supposed to be an ideal diet, it's probably raw fruit. Because, I have serious questions about evolution in the long scale of things. That's not that I don't think things change and transmute. I don't think evolution. I'm very questionable about the time scale of things. That would be interesting if a lot of the system was true, and ultimately, when I do come up with a magic book, I am going to talk about kind of more of because I've been working with someone on a grand theory that's kind of appropriates the mainstream knowledge, and it registers very well, is the best way I can put it. More so than kind of, because I'm a pretty adamant flat earther. But when I really think about this grand theory book idea about what I'm proposing, it's like, well, that actually, as much as I don't trust NASA, they're doing something that's real substantive research. That's real. Anytime NASA talks about the planets, I know that's immediately real. When I talk about extrasolar objects, it's all garbage. But when you talk about, anyway, back to the mystery, because that's societal shit. But in the mystery, what do? We, at some point, begin to react to our world at a guttural level. If you're watching this, I assume at some point you had to begin to realization there's something inauthentic about our world. And when I was about 20 years old, I got more or less radicalized on YouTube through basically, it was right-wing traditionalist ideas, but it's not that. You can't really. It seems right-wing, but not to say there isn't left-wing traditionalism. But that's like a very there's right-wing, here's the whole spectrum of right-wing and left-wing traditionalism. It's like there and there. It's like it's minuscule. You might as well just say it's all centrist. May not even. The main theory is ultimately. Ultimately the difference between right wing and left wing traditionalism is how do they ultimately react to materialism, but that's not really relevant. So I watch these videos on traditionalism. It's about the Kali Yuga and the Kalki Avatara, and as someone who was suffering, and I still suffer from solopism, but I talk about the solopism not because I believe I'm special in that sense, but I have this framework I know because of I've been mandated by greater powers than me to have this mentality, to experience this experience in this particular way, so I can relate to it more with my artwork, because ultimately my ultimate demographic with a lot of my stuff is like a future Kali Yuga. So I have to think from that perspective of how do I appeal to a certain kind of mental illness state, in a far more dystopian future than our rather easy Kali Yuga. I got 10 more minutes of footage, and I don't know how much more power left. Not a lot, I could tell you that much. But I'm coming to it. I don't have much more to say, but I need to talk more about relevant things about the mystery. So in the mystery, we come to discover our world's inauthentic, and through discovering this inauthenticity, we have to discover the real world. And a really good book. I don't think I recommended this in occult books to read, but this is probably the first book you should read if you kind of want a non-magical view. You want a secularized view of a magical world. You need to read Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. That is essential. It's basically the writer is just demonstrating this, what he would call a secular Buddhist vision of the world. And it's very, the writing style is second person, and I guess that really registered with me when I was younger, and it stuck with me. And I realized, oh, this is the ultimate knowledge. Like, this is the kind of style you have to do to kind of really kind of awaken consciousness, not just mine, but yours and everyone's, because ultimately, when it comes to it, the flow of history is determined by the rise and fall of consciousness. And when you kind of realize who you are, where you are, and what's going on, you can begin to go, okay, how do I want to adapt to this malleable environment? One of the things about Kali Yuga that makes it ideal is not only is means of liberation easy, chanting the names of Godhead, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It also means caste mobility is much more possible, and I think they mean this on a racial level. I mean, that's how I interpret it in terms of when they talk about caste mobility in the Kali Yuga. They're talking about the Varnas, and individuals in existentialist way, not just racial but existentialist. At a certain point, I was more or less motivated by romantic gestures. I mean, I got into necromancy because there was a girl I liked, nice, cute Aryan, a little chubby, but it's not a big deal, ex saber fencer. She was class A at Duke University. So it wasn't haha, this is affirmative action girly sports. This was serious shit. Because people can get hurt in sword play. It really is not. She was fast, and she was shorter than me, and I had much longer arms than her. And we'd get drunk sometimes, and we'd strike each other really quick. She'd always win. I think I beat her once in terms of quick, because when you do saber, it's about striking, a minimal strike that's worth points. So it was kind of like that. She was very fast with her fucking short arms, and I have a scar right here from that one time because she cut me with her fingernail. And ultimately, she wanted to become a lich, and I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And then I realized magic was real, and I was like, oh, well, then there's probably a recipe for lichdom. And so I was like, oh yeah, magic's real, and I started dabbling a little into it. And then I met someone, a much more attractive woman physically, though I really was into Ashley at the time for a very long time. Only thinking about her. Didn't really like my trolling antics, and eventually just didn't like the fact that I was getting magic, thought I was going crazy. And then she said some shit about some spirit guy told her that, we shouldn't be friends anymore. I know, right? Regardless, even though we stopped being friends in around the year 2014, I continued to pursue occult research because I was motivated by love. I found Leah Wendell, and then I read Our Name is Melancholy, the complete works of Israel, and that really kind of that's a really important book for an existentialist. Like, you need to read that book, and I think I've talked about that in the occult book video about which to read. But I have only a few more minutes. Gotta focus on kind of the quintessential of this lecture, and that's about discovering yourself. Now, there's a lot of means you can discover yourself. There's a lot of, the human is very customizable, and part of the customization is about realizing who you are ethnically, because that has to deal with your associations with various deities. You need to look into astrology. That will tell you your strengths and weaknesses. And the problem with astrology is it's kind of 4 levels of how to learn astrology. You have to learn basic, basic bitch astrology, the normal system. Then you have to find out that even though modern astrology has more data points that are relevant, the problem with it is its timing's off. And then you have to get into older astrology systems, and I forget its name, but if you talk to people, because I have not really studied astrology, but this is kind of the reason why I haven't gotten into it, because I don't have the time to dive into that when I have other research that could be better at, because I know plenty of people who are good at astrology. I'd rather have them focus on that kind of research rather than me do it, because I have my own unique abilities. So you learn there's this older system of astrology that's more based off the correct times. You have to learn that. Stage 3 is finding about, talking to astrology and gaining it from, trusted, wise individuals. I know several of them who are like this, who I can seek and know what they're talking about. And then stage 4 is you learn enough about astrology that you just begin to develop your own points because of, inner wisdom that comes to you through, the establishment of subconscious communication through development of the anima or animus. The anima and the animus are subconscious egregores that Carl Jung talks about, and he divides them in 4 parts, essentially. The one for males is personified as a female that has 4 different evolutionary stages. For the female, it's experienced as a male, and that is 4 different individuals of their own unique natures. And first and foremost is, I'll describe it from the anima. It is Eve, Helen, Mary, and Sophia. And that kind of gives you an idea of what's corresponding on the male, though the male side is like Tarzan, and then like the second one is the Hemingway, and the third one is more kingly elements of it, or a politician, and the fourth is kind of the male correspondence of Sophia, the Mercury. Understanding what kind of incarnation you are in, because you have to correspond this information to the higher level, to yourself. your current incarnation. I mean, we incarnate a bunch of times, but 4 incarnations are more important than others in terms of your eternal relationship to Godhead. And, that is something you have to figure out on your own through various occult mediums.